Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're kind of doing this video in a more chill setting, just at my kitchen table, because we're going to be talking about something that a lot of people have kind of been talking about on BookTube, and I don't know if on BookTok, I'm really not on BookTok, so I don't know if they're talking about it there, but definitely this is something that has come up on BookTube a lot and in my comment section a lot, especially when we were doing the worst books of 2023 and the best books of 2023. It seemed like a lot of people were having an issue finding new favorites this year, and especially from the 2023 releases or even some 2022 releases. It just seemed like people had a really bad reading year, and that was kind of the general consensus with everyone. Like, even if you were able to read a lot of books, it felt like it was more quantity over quality, and I feel like that's how I felt this year too. But at the same time, I'm mixed, because I feel like I didn't find any super new favorites. Like, there were a couple thrown in there, but I also felt like I didn't find any new, like, absolutely hated them books, except for, like, again, one or two. It just felt like a very in the middle kind of year. Like, I feel like everything that I read that was published in 2023 just kind of existed in this space of I don't really care. And like I said, there are a few that don't fall into that, but it does seem like a lot of people agree with that. And there is some speculation about why people think books are just bad now. Not bad, but they're worse than they were before. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about in this video. We're going to use some specific examples of books that people did not enjoy this past year, and these are going to be specifically 2023 releases, except for I did throw one 2022 release in here. And two of the books we're going to go on kind of a little bit of a deep dive, but the rest are just going to be examples of what people mean when they're speculating about a certain reason. So let's first talk about some of the reasons people think that books are just not as good this year. One of the big ones that I've seen mentioned over and over again are definitely the publishing companies and the expectations that they put on these authors. I think a lot of people forget that writing is an art. Writing is an art, but publishing is a business. So when you mix business and art, you're going to have some problems. So a lot of people think that the publishing industry is pushing these authors so hard to get books out, because most authors, if you want to be successful, if you want to make money, because really writing is not a great way to make a lot of money unless you are like the big people, the big names like J. Kristoff, obviously J.K. Rowling, Cassandra Clare, Holly Black. Like, those people are the ones that are bringing in the money. And you also want those book deals. So these publishing houses are definitely putting some deadlines on these authors, especially if they're under contract with them to write multiple books. So the consensus kind of is that publishing houses should like relax a little bit with their deadlines. But then on the other hand, then the authors aren't getting paid because they're not putting out material. So it becomes this balancing act of putting out books, but making sure you're spending enough time on the book to actually make it good. Another one that is a very interesting one that's come up a lot and probably going to be a bit controversial is the increase in self-publishing. There has been a crazy increase in self-publishing, especially in the romance genre, and it's great that it's now accessible for people to get their books out there and make a living, hopefully, and do that. But with that comes the problem of not having an editor, not going through the normal channels of marketing, not doing that, and that's where TikTok comes in later. TikTok kind of goes hand in hand with this a little bit. But like I said, self-publishing can be great, but if you're not having anyone seriously edit your work or look at it and objectively say, okay, this is good, but where it's heading is not so good, because you could have a great first book and then you just don't know where to go in a story. You don't have people, like a team, to bounce ideas off of, and you don't have someone just generally editing your ideas. So that can lead to just a lower quality of a story, even just for typos and that kind of stuff. There has been an increase in people seeing just random mistakes in books that you wouldn't expect. So that's definitely a controversial one, because again, you kind of want, you want to be able to publish your books, because it's hard to get into a publishing house, but you got to think about that other side of it as well. This is one that I've seen a couple times that I think is an interesting point. A lot of the books that came out this year or last year were started or written during COVID. And COVID was a weird time for a lot of people. Everyone was stuck inside. People were trying to do artistic outlets, and it is possible a lot of these books just aren't as good as the authors initially thought while they were stuck inside doing nothing other than reading, because some authors like push some books out during the COVID years. So it is possible that the quality just went down because of that. And like I kind of said with the publishing thing, it definitely seems like we have hit an era of publishers want volume over quantity. Like, people are just pumping out books. Like, they are coming out with books like there is no tomorrow. And I feel like I used to notice a lot of new books coming out, but not to this like extent. Like, when I go through and I look at the new books coming out every month, I'm just like, this is crazy. Why are there so many books coming out? Especially when authors are publishing 2 or 3 books a year. That's a lot of books. That is a lot of books to be writing in such a short time and going through the editing process. It just seems like a lot. Like I said, it just seems like volume over quality. Now, going back to TikTok, it definitely, a lot of people think reading is taking a nosedive because of the TikTok era that we are in. TikTok, again, I am not really on book talk. I am on animal TikTok. I just watch a ton of cat and dog videos. That is pretty much it. I really don't like book talk that much. There's a couple of people I watch on BookTube that I will follow their book talks, but generally it is not my favorite place to be. I also find it incredibly toxic in some spaces. Like, every social media platform is incredibly toxic at some point, but for me, book talk, and it's why I'm not on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, I'm not on that either because it is incredibly toxic of a space to me. I feel like TikTok is also kind of in that space where if you want to be popular on TikTok, you are recommending the same things over and over and over again. So it is just oversaturated with the same books and the same reviews. And anytime I go on to Book Talk, I'm just like, I've seen the same book like 17 times. Like 17 times. Like, what is this? So yeah, it makes me want to pick up the book, but sometimes the problem is you don't know if that person's being paid, because you're supposed to put a paid sponsorship by people, but a lot of these people, there's a lot of authors on TikTok who are very good at marketing. Does that mean the book is good? No. There's been a lot of instances. Who is Lightlark? Lightlark is a really good example of that. Lightlark was a TikTok phenomenon, and then when it actually came out, it's not good. It is so bad, but her marketing is so good. And that's where TikTok comes into, like, also the self-publishing and people who may not be authors, but they have really, really good ideas. So then they get picked up by a publishing house, but then they don't execute a book well. So TikTok is definitely skewing trends and making people pick stuff up that maybe they wouldn't normally. And then that leads to some books landing on the worst books of the year lists. And then we have a big one. This next one has been brought up quite a few times, where publishing houses, like I said, they are forcing these authors to come out with book after book after book after book. But it's not just about the books anymore. Where the real money is in movies. So you saw like how much Suzanne Collins probably has made from the Hunger Games movies, and then she just had A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes come out, and then we know how much money J.K. Rowling has made off of the Harry Potter movies and merchandise, and there's a whole theme park. So that's what authors really and publishing houses really want. Like, the idea of your books becoming a movie or TV series is like amazing. And what is happening a lot right now is authors are pitching book ideas. Those book ideas are created as like a first rough draft, and those rough drafts are put up for auction for these movie or TV production houses to auction and bid on these things to make more money. So then if they win, you have to be like, oh, like, your thing actually was bought for a movie or a TV series. You need to get it going. You need to go. It's the problem with the Outlander series right now. She started writing the books like so long ago, but now they're caught up. They're caught up with the TV series that started many years after she started writing this. So now the author of Outlander has to kind of hurry up and write the final book, or at least give a first draft to the TV, to Netflix, I guess. Is it Netflix? In order to have a representation of her books. And I have to say, I don't like Game of Thrones. I don't like George R.R. Martin, whatever. I'm just not a big fan. I do appreciate, or I do at least respect the fact that he did not rush his books. he just let the TV company, HBO, whatever, make a terrible ending to the series because he just didn't rush. He was like, I'm not gonna rush and finish the series. Although I'm sure readers would really, really love if he would finish the series. But that's the problem you have. You have not just the publisher pushing you to rush, you have these TV and movie companies now pushing you to rush, which we're probably going to be seeing with the Rebecca Yarros series. But we're gonna talk about that later when we deep dive a little bit into that. And then something that I've also seen recently, this is the last point before we actually get into the deep dive of a couple of these books. Agents and editors, it is a highly cutthroat environment. It is a cutthroat job. It is really hard with an English degree to just get a job. And so if you get a job in a publishing house, you are expected to produce, almost like a car salesman. Like, you need to get out there, you need to find authors, you need to find book ideas, and then you need to sell the hell out of them. Like, your life depends on these books doing well. So yeah, you might be editing them, but you also need to get them out quickly so they're making money. They're making your publishing house money. So yeah, you want to look good in the eyes of your publishing house to, you know, keep your job and hopefully get a raise, because these jobs aren't paid super well. So because of that, you definitely have editors and the publishing house and everything just harping on these authors to get stuff out. And it's become, the industry does seem like it's become more business and less art over the years, just because of how many books are pumped out every year. So that kind of wraps up all of the things that I've seen. I'm sure there's a ton more reasons, but now we're going to get into some specific books to kind of give examples of some of these. Speaking of a book that I literally just read, Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. This is a perfect example of a couple of different things. I even went through some booktube reviews of this. A lot of people had this as book club picks this year. And then I listened to a couple of interviews actually with Ashley Winstead to kind of get her idea of what she was thinking while she was actually reading it. And I was honestly kind of surprised. If you didn't know, Midnight is the Darkest Hour is the latest release by Ashley Winstead, who is a pretty well-loved thriller mystery writer. She also writes romance on the side. Haven't really heard much about her romance books, but I definitely know people are obsessed with some of her thriller books, like In My Dreams I Hold a Knife and The Last Housewife. Very well received books. So this was a highly, like, everyone was very excited about this book coming out, and especially because the premise is very different from her previous two books. This book is taking place, it's kind of like a Southern Gothic story where we have our main character who is a repressed teenage girl who becomes obsessed with Twilight, and she meets this boy, and this boy and her and the whole town are dealing with some murders that are occurring, and a skull is found pretty early in the book. And this, again, there's no spoilers that are happening for this book, but it says that she knows what's the deal with the skull. So obviously there's a cool mystery in there. There's potentially some weird romance things, some red flags, and you are taking place in this small, very preachy, very religious town. So a lot of things that can happen in this book. So this book has a 3.46 on Goodreads, that's very low. Anything below a 3.6 generally is agreed upon to not be that great. And I personally gave this book a 1 star, but I'm going to be speaking not from a little bit from my personal experience, but we're going to go based off of generally the vibes of this book and what other people have said in the interview that I read. So I did end up listening to a podcast called the Writers Inc. podcast, and the main host of it is an author called J.D. Barker. And there was something very interesting that happened at the very beginning of the podcast that I don't know if it's just how he speaks about things. Don't take this as he doesn't like his own book, but I did think it was very interesting that he opened talking about his own book that he just wrote. And he was talking about how difficult it was shopping around right now because of some of the fluctuation going on in the publishing industry, but he called his own book decent, which I thought was a very interesting choice of words. Like, I feel like that just shows you like where we are with publishing, that a person talking about their own book on their own podcast calls it decent. He said it's pretty decent. And it's like, that's interesting. Like, that doesn't make me want to read it. That makes me feel like you wrote it to fill a quota and to make money. And again, I can't blame him for that because you're trying to make a living. But at the same time, I don't really want to read that, something you called your own work decent. So I thought that was interesting that we started off with that like right away. For this episode, they actually did an interview with Ashley Winstead, and I really was expecting this book, like her to talk about it almost in a parody way because it was goofy. Like, there was very goofy things. It was very Twilight fan fiction-y the way it was written. So I was expecting her to kind of be like, this is a satire, no, this is is a very serious book to her. I was absolutely surprised, and I feel like the way she talked about it shows some of the issues with the publishing industry and how probably her book should have been edited a certain way instead of just letting what happened come out, because this could have been avoided. This actually probably could have been a really, really good book if some different choices were made. But it seems like instead of actually editing it, they just rushed it out, because Ashley Winstead came out with 2 books this past year, a romance and a thriller. And then the previous year, she came out with another 2 books, a romance and a thriller. And then the previous year, her first book came out, just 1 book. But I mean, that's so many books. That is so many books. 2 books a year, that's a lot of writing. And I get it's like your full-time job, but you're coming, like, there's marketing, there's editing, like multiple rounds of editing that you have to get through. So to actually finish the book and then go through all the rounds of editing, and you're able to put out 2 books a year, something's a little bit suspicious about that. So Ashley Winstead talked about this book as it being her favorite book that she has ever written. And I think a lot of that comes from, she said that she put herself a lot into Ruth. She wanted to write the book as this kind of showing that teenage girls have like super high emotions and they just feel things more than a lot of other people. And she basically said that she wanted to write a love letter to Twilight because she originally did not like Twilight. She was a little bit older when the craze came out, so she never really understood it. But then one of her friends explained to her that, sorry, my dog is clicking in the background, so you're gonna hear his little paws because he's hyper right now. Oh, yeah, as I'll say, you can see him. So she said that she really didn't appreciate Twilight when she was younger, and then when she was doing her degree, she still was making fun of it until one of her friends mentioned, like, hey, when I was teaching, when I was teaching a class in a rural place in America, the only way to get some of these kids to read was Twilight. It's actually what made these kids voracious readers. So I don't care if you guys don't like it, but it's what made these kids read, and I will always like it because of that. And I was like, that is a really, really good point. But the problem is, you decided to create something based on the backbone of a story that, yeah, most people do think is absurd now. And she said that she wanted the readers to fall in love with the couple and then be confused about the gray area, what they were willing to do for this couple. And I think right there is the point where we realize what went wrong with this book. She wrote a romance. That's really what this is. She got on the kind of dark romance train, and it was marketed as a thriller mystery. And that is where we have something that I didn't talk about too much, but mismarketing. Mismarketing is an issue. So Ashley Winstead already had a really, really big following. The publisher house probably saw that, and they didn't want to really ruffle any feathers by trying to market this book to dark romance readers, because it probably wouldn't get as many people to read it. If you said this was mainly dark romance with a little bit of mystery in it, her thriller readers were not going to buy it. Or some of them would, but they would probably go to the library, they would probably wait for a hold to come in. They wouldn't go out of their way to actually physically buy the book. And that's where you have the issue of, again, publishing houses choosing money over supporting kind of their authors, because again, I think if this went to the correct audience, it probably would have been good. But we also have the issue of Ashley Winstead kind of pandering a little bit to that audience of Twilight. That's where you get another problem here. Like, it's almost like if she were to write a thriller based on how much she loved Fourth Wing right now. It is just pandering to an audience that already loves something. So you are expecting them to love your book because they love the thing that you obsess with about in the book. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The readers don't buy it. Like, no one bought this book. Everyone, like, oh, it was rough. People thought it was a satire when it was it was very serious. It was a very serious book, apparently. Ashley Winstead believed it was serious. She even has a reading section in the back, like a reading guideline. And that is a big problem when you as an author and you as a publishing house are on this side and your readers are over here, and you're not understanding what your readers actually want, because nobody wanted a weird thriller, dark romance, Twilight fan fiction from a thriller writer. It's just not what people wanted. And that seems to be, again, a problem of mismarketing, publishing houses really not understanding what their audience wants and just pushing out books and not editing books, because a lot of this could have been caught in editing, because all you had to do was tone down the Twilight stuff. She could have brought up Twilight at the beginning, briefly and then just tone it all down and don't have direct scenes that parallel Twilight. That is what made it satirical. So basically, in conclusion, I would say this is a mix of genre bending that probably didn't need to happen, mismarketing to the wrong audience because this was a weird dark romance instead of a thriller, and you were pandering to the Twilight generation that didn't want this in the first place. Oh, and because it came off as fan fiction, we've been having a lot of romance fan fiction with Kylo Ren, etc. The publishing houses are like, there's a group that really, really likes it, but when you try to move it into a different group, like if you were to do this for the romance group, it probably would have went over well, potentially. But you put this into the thriller category, and a lot of thriller readers are not, like, they might be fans of fan fiction, but probably not in a format where they have to physically buy the book to read it. So it's just really complicated with this book, and there's a lot of factors that people did not like the outcome of this. Like, there were multiple things that people were just like, this is not it. This is really not it. So some quotes by readers, they're approximated quotes, but during the book troop, we had a quote from Elias and Gabby. The book troop is a book club group on YouTube. They do a lot of thriller, mystery, horror books. It's really fun. They pick really good books most of the time. And Gabby Reads is the main host of the book troop, and then she has people come on. So for this one, for Midnight is the Darkest Hour, so Elias thought they were getting a paranormal thriller, and what I got was a small town romance with a little mystery. I mean, that says it right there. Like, you think you're getting one thing and you get something completely different, which seems to happen more and more, especially when authors want to try different genres and publishing houses don't want to upset the status quo. They want to keep their normal audience, especially if it's a popular author. So then Gabby said, why is this being marketed as a thriller? I feel like it's pretty obvious that that was the main problem. So then I saw another review that actually was a 5-star, and it's by the channel Chapter and Converse. They give it 5 stars, but they went into the book completely blind. So they didn't see any marketing, had no idea what it was about, nothing. So again, I feel like this just points to like, hey, like you really needed to fix your marketing, and that would have happened if you cared more about the author and your readers instead of just making money. And if you actually took time to like put a campaign together, edited the book slowly, gave it more time other than a year. That's all they had. And then Books with Lala also did a live, and she said this was a 4-star romance and a 2-star mystery. Yeah, so because she ended up giving it a 3, she just combined the two. So if you really needed to either go more into the romance and make it less satirical and less weird, or you needed to tone down the romance and go into the mystery more, or just make it more satirical, more parody, make it more obvious. It just didn't seem like the author or the publishing house understood the social landscape that they were putting this book into. It didn't go to the right people, and it just ended up not working. So the next ones that we're going to talk about are obviously Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, which I know is funny because I feel like this is talking about worst books, but a lot of people had Fourth Wing as their worst book, even though it has one of like the highest Goodreads ratings. Fourth Wing has a 4.62 with like a crazy number of ratings, and then Iron Flame has a 4.38. So even though it says they're really, really high, that doesn't tell the whole story. Fourth Wing was on a significant number of people's worst lists. Like, I went through like 30 videos of worst lists, and Fourth Wing was on like 10 of them, I think. So that was more than any of the other ones that I was compiling. That is a lot of worst lists. Of course, it's also on a ton of best lists. It was on my best list. I loved Fourth Wing and I loved Iron Flame, but this is in my opinion here, matters, but there's also another side of the story that also matters and does talk about the marketing industry in a very scary light, because this could happen again and it be a worse situation. And it's a bad situation for Rebecca Yarros, the author of these books. So let's talk about what the situation is with this. We mostly pretty much all know this. So this is a situation of TikTok, pretty book, just pushing a book out. That's what really this is. Chasing the high, chasing the pretty book, chasing that kind of stuff. There is a FOMO on BookTube and Book Talk, fear of missing out if you didn't know what that meant, that you've got to have the pretty books because they are normally special edition runs, and I think a lot of this comes from book boxes. Book boxes do a lot of very specific runs. There's only like a couple thousand copies, and it's really hard to get them afterwards. And Fourth Wing, the publishing company Red Tower, saw that and ran with it. And it was honestly genius marketing, because you have a new publishing house, you have an author who's been writing, I think she said since 2014, but they're books that not a lot of people have been reading. So they wanted to take this book and be like, okay, we really need to run with it. We really need to make this something that people want to buy. So I remember going into the bookstore, and these books were literally just sitting on a bottom shelf, and there was a stack of them. I didn't really think anything of it, and I saw the sprayed edges, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is a fantasy book. I like fantasy. So instead of picking a bunch of other fantasy books from authors that I knew, I picked this book up because it had pretty stenciled edges. I hadn't heard anything about this book. I just bought it thinking it looked cool. And that's pretty much what a lot of people did. And then the hype started coming out, and the TikTok stories and the Instagram posts and the book talk, and then, or booktube, and then suddenly this book was nowhere. You couldn't find it. So it became this like, oh my gosh, I have to get my hands on it, which made the hype even higher. And it was genius. It was genius marketing. Does that mean the book is good? Personally, I loved it. I thought it was super entertaining. Do I think it's like a work of art? No, I don't think it's like a great book. I thought it was just really entertaining. But a lot of people saw a lot of problems with this book. A lot of people did not like this book. They thought it was rushed. They felt like there was, the writing was poor. They felt like it could have done with so many more rounds of editing. They felt like the story was just using as many tropes as possible to make people like it. And it really did feel like that. I will agree with that. It used like every trope you could think of. And because of this hype, we had the incredibly quick release of Iron Flame. And I originally was under the impression, due to a previous interview that I read, but the one that I read definitely dispelled that. I was under the impression that she had already written 3 of the books, and basically this was all just editing, but that was not the case. I did a much more thorough deep dive here. That is not the case. These books were written so quickly. We're gonna go over how fast they were written because Rebecca Yarros kind of gives us a full timeline. And to be honest, I am shocked. I am absolutely shocked how fast these came out. And I am so disappointed in Red Tower and just in general how they treated this author, even though I don't think she sees it this way, or if she does, she's not going to say it out loud because she's making a lot of money off of this. So let's talk about kind of the timeline and why this is a perfect example of publishers pushing their authors to the brink to put out material no matter how good or bad it is. So I had 2 interviews that I looked at. The first one was an interview with Professional Book Nerds podcast, and Rebecca Yarros kind of laid out, she wrote Fourth Wing in 2 months. 2 months. Now, that is one thing, but to also have your edits done incredibly quickly after that, that is not enough time for that. That is not a lot of time to have something be thoroughly looked at, have plot holes kind of thought about, and then if you're going to be a series, you really need to know kind of where the series is going to make sure you don't leave plot holes in the first book. So the fact that this was written in 2 months and then came out pretty soon afterwards is like the definition of the problem. And she said that a lot of the issues with why she had to have the book done so early was because of those stenciled edges. So the marketing of this book and the desire to try and push it and try to get as much popularity and TikTok press and BookTok and influencers, etc., to get attached to this book, that is the reason the book was pushed so quickly, because apparently she said that she was surprised how far in advance that she needed to have the book finished and edited for those stenciled edges. So they ended up rushing the book because of that. And a lot of readers were not fooled by that. There is a lot of booktubers who were definitely not fooled by just the prettiness of the book, and they saw the rush in this book. So leading into that, she also wrote a 3rd book this year in between Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. She wrote In the Unlikely Event this year in 2023, and it was published, and it was on the Goodreads Choice Awards, whatever. So how are you putting out and writing 3 books in a span of 12 months? And that's what she says. She wrote about 851,000 words in a 12-month span. Are you kidding me? That's crazy. And you're telling me that all 3 of these books were edited also in those 12 months to come out? What are you doing? Like, again, not on the author. She's just trying to make money. She's trying to put out a book that she loves. But the editors and the publishing house, are you kidding me? Like, the cash grab greediness of this type of situation, and also the author has what Violet has in the book, which is, what is it, Danlos Avers? It's whatever Violet has in the book, and it's a incredibly painful condition. And she even said it, she's like, I pushed my body way too hard. I'm never doing that again. And it's not even Rebecca Yarros who really wanted to push Iron Flame out. She even said the publisher asked her to rush to write Iron Flame. So the second that she was done writing In the Unlikely Event, she started writing Iron Flame. So that means in 2023, she started Iron Flame, finished Iron Flame, and it was fully edited, and put the sprayed edges on it, which we know about that whole drama of them canceling a bunch of orders and not having enough, and it was published. This is why Iron Flame had so many people like up in arms about how bad it was, which again, I don't think the Goodreads rating actually reflects genuinely how the majority of people feel. I gave Iron Flame a 5-star. My best friend gave it a 5-star. But if you talk to people in general, they were very disappointed in Iron Flame if they were fans of the first one, because a lot of people did like the first one, but then they could start seeing the problems with Iron Flame. And I agree, that is unacceptable, writing and editing a book that quickly just to make a cash grab like that. And you don't treat your authors that way. You just don't do it. Like, Rebecca Yarros got you money from this book. You would not be like where you are if not for her book. And maybe, yeah, it was a combination of the marketing, but it really is about her book. If the book sucked, nothing would have happened. They would have been like, oh, it's a pretty book. But these stenciled edges first edition books are selling for $200 to $300 secondhand. That's her. That is her writing that first book. So the publishing house having the audacity to be like, put out another one, okay? The disrespect. Again, authors are treated like livestock in the publishing industry now, and it definitely hurts the art of writing. She even said they rushed Iron Flame to make sure they kept everyone interested in the book series, which I don't think that was a problem. You definitely could have waited a couple more months at least. It would not have been a problem whatsoever. I mean, if you really wanted to keep people interested, then release like a mini story or something, like an in-between story, or a little tiny like 20-page prequel on your website or something like that in between the release of the other two. That's something you could do to keep them interested. You did not need to push out like a 600-page book. That just wasn't necessary. And she even said that she didn't sleep or see her kids or go on any vacation in the 18 months that it took her to write the book and do the book tours. And it's just like, you cannot treat your authors this way. Like, you can't do that. That is just unacceptable behavior from a publishing company. It's not okay. That's not okay. So then there was another interview that was done by Variety Report. The interviewer was Jennifer Moss, which I found funny because it's literally spelled by Sarah J. Maas. And they were talking about rushing, and they said they were rushing due to TV rights. So it turns out that before the book was even published, this is what I talked about, the publishing house was able to sell her book to, I think it went to Amazon. Amazon ended up buying it, and she ended up, this is the disrespect. I directly quoted this from the Variety Report, and this is what Rebecca Yarros said directly in this interview. So it turns out that they gave Amazon a first draft of her book without consulting her. And I was like, that doesn't happen. And they said, no, here, when this happens. And I just looked at my editor and go, you gave them my first draft? The utter disrespect. So disrespectful to an author that you're working with and who has put their trust in you, that you would give them like a first draft of a story is like, it's normally not good. Or if it's good, but there's so much editing that has to be done. And to give it to like a company like Amazon and then come into a meeting and critiquing all these things and you being like, it's been changed since then. You got to at least tell the author or consult with the author first, because obviously Rebecca Yarros did not want them to have a first draft of this because she didn't like it. It's so disrespectful. It's so disrespectful. So I'm scared how they're treating her behind the scenes. Like, this is the stuff she's willing to talk about. Like, what are they doing to her behind the scenes? Because right now she, again, just seems like she is a property of Red Tower and they are using her how they want to. They're basically pimping her out to the book world. This one was definitely an example of cash grab. Publishing houses just playing with greed and not respecting authors as people or artists in general. And this is definitely an example of the commercialization or the business side, the ugly business side of publishing. At the same time, I'm out here like, Rebecca Yarros, get your money. Like that's what's so hard about this. Like, you want her to treat her good, but she probably made so much money off of this. So I'm just like, human rights. Human rights. It's so hard. So anyway, those are kind of my two deep dives, but I do want to bring up a couple, like two more examples. And one of them is the fact that some publishing houses are giving some authors time to write books. But then you run to a different problem. Chain of Thorns and A Court of Silver Flames. I know A Court of Silver Flames came out, I think last year, or was it the year before? Sarah J. Maas can take as long as she wants to write a book. Obviously, if she takes like a couple years, probably not gonna go well. But, and it's the same with the Outlander series. But Chain of Thorns, Cassandra Clare, Sarah J. Maas, I don't remember the author of the Outlander series, they can write whatever they want and they are not edited. Like, I'm sure it's edited for typos and spelling mistakes and plot holes, stuff like that. But generally, there is no reason these books need to be 600 something pages with nothing happening. When I read A Court of Silver Flames, the plot was like 20% of the book and the rest of it was just smut and nonsense. Probably 200 to 300 pages could have been edited out of A Court of Silver Flames and it would have been so much better. I still gave it a 5-star, I still enjoyed it, but because I liked the plot that was going on, but it was so long-winded that it was frustrating to get to. Cassandra Clare is going through the same thing. Chain of Thorns has gotten some of the weakest reviews that like any of her books have gotten, and it's because it's not edited. It is so long. Everyone is talking about how, like, why is this so long? Edit your books. So even though these are like, they're letting them write however long they want to, but then they're not doing anything else really. Like, the publishing house is just relying on their name to make money. So instead of spending time to actually go through the 600, 700 page book, they're just like, oh, their name's gonna have great release, etc. We don't actually need to make the book make sense or be good. And that's what's happening on that side. So you have either you're rushing authors who aren't your like big cash grabs, or you are rushing them to get even more money, or you're letting them take their time so as not to upset them, but you're not doing anything else to help the books actually be good. You're not doing your job like as editors. So and I've seen that a lot. A lot of people are complaining that they feel like these big authors just aren't being edited. So that is also very frustrating. Then we have kind of our last one that I want to go over. There's so many examples that I could keep going over, but we got to talk about TikTok again. TikTok has definitely, like I said, changed the landscape of reading. It really has. Like, even if you don't watch TikTok, you understand, if you're part of the book community, you've seen some of these TikTok books floating around. And one that I've seen a lot of people really not liking, even though I think it still has like a 3.9 on Goodreads. Again, I don't think that gives the full landscape of what's actually happening behind the book. Pucking around. TikTok really pushes these very smutty romance books. Like, this isn't a dark romance, but they do push those a lot. But this is one of those hockey romances. TikTok does trends. This is the best way to explain this. TikTok is a trendsetter. It decides what it likes in these books, and it kind of sets a trend as to what these romance authors kind of chase, is what it seems like. So the author of Pucking Around literally put out 3 books in 2023, 2 of them in this hockey series, and then had another 3 books in 2022. Again, but it's because these authors who, again, don't necessarily make a lot of money, they're trying to catch these TikTok trends of, because hockey romance was the big thing. Hockey romance was so big this year, and I think at the beginning of last year, but oh my gosh, hockey romance was everywhere. And so you want your book to be talked about on TikTok. That is how they get popular. That is how you get people to read them. You want to be able to make your own TikTok as an author and be like, ooh, hockey romance, this is what happens, this and this and this. And that's where you come into problems, because they're rushed books. Again, they don't feel edited. They are cranked out to appease the TikTok trends that are coming out, and they just generally are just fine books. It's not even most of the time that they're like really bad. It's just that they exist as books. And do you really want to read a book that is just like there? Like, I don't. I want every book I read to be the best book I've ever read. Like, I want every book to like live in my head like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I don't want to read something that is just put out for the sake of popular trends. That is not what I want. And I definitely feel like we are heading into reading is going to be entirely decided by social media trends. We've already seen it a lot in 2023, but it's just getting worse. It's getting worse with TikTok being such a big thing. BookTube is, I would say, a little more reasonable, a little more diverse, but it still definitely follows in the trends because you want to get views, you want to make money. That's where it's at. Instagram is probably just as bad as TikTok. That is all about aesthetics. I really hate Instagram. I've been trying to post, but I really don't like it. Again, I see the same books over and over and over again. And if you're not posting those, you're not getting views. Like, I think I posted a picture of Iron Flame when it came out and I got like 30 likes, something like that. And I posted recently a picture of Magnolia Parks and it got like 3 likes. So if you're not talking about the books that everyone is talking about, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna struggle in the influencer world. So that is also what is kind of making these influencers read certain things, and that is skewing what people are reading. And that is why we have stuff that is on these worst lists and people are just confused about the stuff that's going on. And I think conglomeration of everything I've talked about, this is kind of why it feels like the book industry is going downhill. And I think there's so many good books out there, but the volume of books that are coming out are hiding these really, really good books. And it's almost like looking for a needle in a haystack right now. You don't know what you're getting into when you walk into a bookstore. You're like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what's good. I don't know what I'm gonna like. This is what other people are liking, but am I gonna like this? So it's confusing. It's difficult to sort through everything that's going on. And I think it's hard. It's a difficult time to be a reader because of just the sheer volume of things that are coming out. And again, you're being told all different directions about what these books are. So anyway, that's kind of just what I wanted to talk to you guys about, because I noticed a lot of people talking about this at the end of the year and still into the beginning of this year. So it's just a very important topic right now about the book industry. And it's just a lot. It's a lot. There's a lot going on. And again, there is plenty more to talk about, but I kind of just wanted to keep it brief. This is not super brief, but that's kind of my general immediate thoughts. I would love to hear what you guys think about the book industry and books that you've read that you just don't really understand, maybe why they were pushed out that quickly, or like if they needed editing, etc. Just, anything in the comments. So I'd love to hear a commentary about what you think about this and some of the books that I brought up. I hope you enjoyed the video, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future content, and I'll see you guys in the next one.